Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I'm so excited to speak with you all on just some different areas of service and how we can connect that into service learning. So, will you give me a brief overview just for those who are listening who don't quite know who you are or your connection to Mullen?
All right, I'll start and then Ab and Soph jump in. So I'm Janelle Kloosterman, and I started at Mullen when I was 19. I was actually a tutor, and it was a summer tutoring project that I had to do for college, and so I tutored freshmen. It was actually incoming freshmen. So I started at 19. Had was lucky to be offered a position, and well, I also actually student taught there. Then was offered a position, so I taught world history and US history for about 8 years, and then moved into activities director, then moved into being service learning director, and eventually ended my time at Mullen in 2018 as the principal. So I really grew up at Mullen, and it taught me a lot about service and about serving others. And also, it was something that impacted me professionally and personally.
My name is Abby Kloosterman. I graduated from Mullen in 2014. Um, and yeah, I grew up around Mullen, so that's my connection there.
Well, I'm Sophia Kloosterman. I'm the youngest. And, you know, Janelle likes to say she grew up at Mullen. No, me and Abby grew up at Mullen. We were running around that place doing all kinds of fun service work things as we were growing up. I graduated in 2018, where through Mullen, I did a bunch of different service work within Mullen and outside of Mullen, and then which has led me to do a lot more outside of my high school career. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. I love to see the legacy and the connection of what service has meant to you all and just like you were saying, Sophia, how you grew up in this service world. So I guess that brings me to my first question of what does service mean to your family?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start off with this one. Well, uh, as I said before, since we all grew up kind of doing service work, it was always something in our family that was a very like big value with all of us. So like me and my sister when we were younger, we would go to senior support, which was a service thing that my mom did when she was an activities director, and we would do Booville and all that kind of stuff. And so it just really taught us um, real empathy and real compassion for others, which I think is a very important basis to have as a person. Um,
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. I think it's great to hear just how young you were when you started service. I think a lot of times people will get to be adults and then they'll realize, oh wow, am meant to give back. That's what we're all called to do. So
right.
if is that something that you guys would want to speak on a little bit on what the importance of giving back means?
Yeah, so as Sophia mentioned, service and giving back was always a foundation of our family. And so as the girls were growing up, I would bring them to service experiences just for that reason, so that they could experience what it is to give back to the community, and also the experience of surrounding themselves with others who might not be like them. And that's how you build that compassion, right? It's through those relationships. And so, as we were growing up, and as a mom and two young daughters, I firmly believed that it's about building community with those who aren't like you, because I think Sophia mentioned this, is that that's where you build that empathy and compassion. And so, yes, they were at Booville helping me set up. They would have fun, also bring their costumes, but they also would help me set up. They were there when we did the family Christmas and Thanksgiving. They would go shopping with me and pick out the gifts for the younger kids. And so it's actually just a foundation of our family, and it continues, which was always my goal, right? Is that when my young daughters grew up and we're adults, they continue to contribute and to help make this world a better place. Because I think that's what we're called to do, is to make the world a better place and to create level playing fields, right, for those who are not as fortunate. We come from privilege, and I think that's important to recognize that. And then how do we continue to bring forward our experiences, and in order to help others lead a life that is a little more comfortable and has more resources.
That's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is really impactful to hear how we are called to level the playing field, like you said, or just to bring ourselves into sometimes an uncomfortableness of serving others and what that means to serve others. So I am sure I've mentioned this to you all previously, but we are hosting, but we are having a alumni month of service upcoming in April. And it is essentially an opportunity for all alumni to come together and be a Mullen community committed to our motto of enter to learn, leave to serve. And whatever that looks like. If you live out of state, if you live in state, if you want to do all of these different things, we just ask that you share your story with us, because that is a huge part, not the most important part, but a huge part of service as well, is being able to testify that you are able to, you're able to give back, and what it means to give back and inspire others through those stories. So that's my next question. Can you share a favorite service experience or story?
Ooh, I have one that I can do real quick. It's a short one. It's a mix of different memories. So as I mentioned before, I would go do senior support with my mom when I was younger, and I was like 9, 10, 11, 12, like that kind of age. And my favorite part of that entire opportunity to serve and be with all those people was my mom would let me take the cart around with all the desserts and cookies. And so I would give them out to everyone. And of course, like they're all loving the little girl who's running around. So I'm like chit-chatting. I remember like my mom was really close with one of the guys there. So like I would always sit there and hang out with him. It's one of my like core memories as a child, and it's one of the core memories that have shaped me as a person as well.
I can just share another one. I think one for me that was the most memorable was going to um the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. And I I don't know if they still do that. I don't know if Mullen still does it, but um that was, I mean, really impactful for a lot of people. But I think like just that experience of being able to, go to a place, that was um obviously it so it was obviously, it's a place where, a lot of people experience a lot of trials and tribulations and incredibly high poverty levels. And what we kind of learn in school and all of that is, so much that like I guess we see so many things that aren't like the entire story. Like we don't have a great understanding of like, reservations are towns of people like, and who have daily lives, who live just like the rest of us do. But there is incredible poverty there. So there was just an understanding of, you know, um like it kind of enmeshing yourself into a culture of people that like you might not be familiar with. And just in general, that whole experience was amazing. We worked at the LaSallian school there, got to know so many kids, the principals and teachers, and yeah, I mean that was just one of my most like I think memorable service experiences that I had through Mullen and really ever in my life, honestly.
So I think, Abigail brought up a really important point, is that immersion trips are life-changing, right? Immersion trips. So you have direct and indirect service, right? So the indirect is the canned food drives. which are great and awesome. And it's the way that it's a doorway into service when you do the canned food drives. But then you have the immersion trips, and that's transformational, right? And so it's living, again, it goes back to that concept of being in solidarity with those that you serve. So you're in community. And so students, young people, when they do the immersion trips, and adults, because I just did one that I'll talk about in a second, but it enables them to see life through the eyes of others. And so rather than standing back and judging, and to recognize that sometimes it's a result of resources, it's a result of policy, where folks like those on Indian reservations, Native Americans, are living in poverty. We have policies, as I said, and we have lack of resources. And so they're able to see that no, it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're alcoholics necessarily. It's because they don't have the resources. And again, there's policies that really impact their ability to rise up, right? The whole concept, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, is pretty challenging. So I think that that's the transformation that students experience when they go into immersion, and adults as well. I just did a trip to Kenya. I was invited along with a brother, Armand Alcazar, to do a presentation for our schools in the Luanga district. And so it was 7 different schools. And so I did a presentation on the life of De La Salle, and then I was able to do some work with the women there in leadership. And what struck me is I lived in simplicity. My room wasn't great. The food wasn't anything I was used to. We ate the same thing every day. But that wasn't what it was about. It was about the people, and it was about the relationships that I built with them. And they live very simply, and so that's what's transformational about this work. So I think that is it changes lives, not only for those who are serving, but for those who are serving.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love to be able to hear stories that are rooted in those immersion trips, like you were both speaking on, and then also too, like you spoke on, Sophia, just little moments that make a big impact and that stick with us. So as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to see if there was any last sentiments, any last call to actions that you guys wanted to express.
Yeah, I think I would just add that, like, I think our whole conversation has just talked about how service to others isn't always, in those like physical things. But it really can just be kind of this mindset of like going about your day and about your life, knowing that you aren't the only person on the planet. There are, 7 billion other people that are in completely different situations than you are, and just having a little bit of perspective as you go about your day and about your life. And I think that just informs the way that we all can interact with each other. And also that there are a lot of great opportunities, like even professionally, you can be on boards of different organizations. I'm part of the Pink Agenda. It's a really incredible nonprofit that's based in New York and a few other cities around the country. And I serve on their leadership council. And there's not always like some level of like physical service that we're doing, but there's a lot of like awareness building and a lot of work around funding for breast cancer research, and just these like things that you might be passionate about in your daily life, or for whatever reason. There are a lot of different ways that you can mix that with your kind of professional adult life, because once things get busy, like, and you have a legitimate career or whatever might be going on post college, like you might not always have time for that, but there's so many different ways that you can continue this kind of like value of leaving to serve. It can be in so many different ways. That doesn't just have to be that like typical thing that you might think of when you think of service immediately. But I think that's kind of just how I've done it. So it's not always the perfect path for everybody, but I found causes that are really important to me, and that's kind of how I continue that like legacy of service, I guess.
And I'm going to add, Abigail's ran the New York City Marathon twice to raise money for breast cancer research. So gonna also physically put yourself out there too.
Yeah, that was definitely a physical thing. That's very true.
Physical service.
Yeah.
My little last thing I want to add, be empathetic towards others, and that will lead you very far away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's part of the foundation of Lasallian education, and it's been for 350 years, since John Baptist de La Salle began schools for the street kids, is recognizing that we are called as Lasallians to serve. And that's part of being in the Lasallian community, is it is the legacy and is the foundation of what we are and who we are as in the Lasallian charism and in the mission. It's about being uncomfortable. It's about serving those on the peripheries. And as a member of Lasallian community, that's part of who we are. As I said, it's foundational. It's foundational in the writings of De La Salle and the writings that have come out, over the past 60, 70 years, is we are called to serve the marginalized. Look at our 5 core principles, right? That's one of our core principles. And again, it's about serving as to become advocates and serving in solidarity. And it's not just about getting those service hours, which I know, that's part of graduating from Mullen, and that's totally okay. But it's also about experiencing something that is transformational.